Discover the true meaning behind the demons and the pigs in the story of Jesus. Have you ever read this passage and not understood why the demons asked Jesus to enter the pigs? The story seems simple, but it carries a rare depth that goes far beyond the surface. Perhaps you, like many others, have wondered what Jesus' presence in the face of evil really means, what he means by freeing the possessed man, and how this applies directly to our lives. Imagine the scene: a man, trapped in incomprehensible suffering, living isolated, tormented and without control over himself. How many of us have not felt trapped, oppressed by something invisible, anxious for a liberation that seems out of reach? Perhaps what is missing is precisely this deep understanding of what true freedom is. This is your chance to find the answers that have the power to transform your perception. Let's explore this story with a perspective that connects, that speaks directly to the pain and struggles that we all face. By the end, you will understand the purpose of this passage and find in it the solution to spiritual and emotional challenges that seem insurmountable. Prepare to discover something that can change the way you see your own life and spiritual journey. Imagine that you are in a boat on a large, calm lake. Suddenly, the sky begins to darken, and the wind becomes strong, very strong. The waves rise like mountains and the boat begins to rock, shaking from side to side. You hold on with all your strength, but fear grows, because it seems that the boat will sink at any moment. This is exactly what Jesus' friends, the disciples, felt. They were sailing with him on the Sea of Galilee when a violent storm appeared out of nowhere. The disciples screamed, looking at the dark sky and the rough sea, while the wind blew so hard that they could barely stand in the boat. They tried everything to keep the boat on course, but nothing seemed to work. The fear grew, and they were sure that they were lost. And what was Jesus doing? To their surprise, Jesus was sleeping in the middle of that storm. He seemed so calm that the disciples could hardly believe it. Then, with voices full of terror, they woke him, shouting, "Lord, do you not care that we are perishing?" They were desperate, not knowing what else to do. And it was at that moment that Jesus stood up, looked at the storm and said firmly, "Peace, be still." And as if by magic, the wind stopped, the waves calmed down, and the sea was again as calm as before. At that moment, the disciples were silent, amazed and a little scared. How could Jesus have such power? How could he control the wind and the sea? This miracle was not just about calming the storm on the lake. It was about showing that, even in the storms of life, in the moments when everything seems out of control and fear wants to dominate us, Jesus is there, with the power to bring us peace. This story is like a living lesson. It teaches us that even when we face challenges and feel fear, we can find calm and strength. Just as he calmed the waters of that lake, Jesus can help us calm our hearts, face our fears and find peace, even when everything seems to be falling apart around us. After calming the storm, Jesus and his disciples arrived on the opposite shore of the Sea of Galilee, in a region called Decapolis. Decapolis was a group of 10 cities that were influenced by Greek and Roman culture and customs. It was a very different place from where Jesus and his disciples used to preach. There, most people did not follow Jewish laws and traditions. For the Jews, the territory was strange and even uncomfortable, almost like being in another world. Soon, something curious caught their attention: pigs grazing on the hills. In the Jewish context, pigs were seen as impure, animals that no one touched or raised, nor were they used as food, since the laws of the Torah forbid the consumption of pork. But for the inhabitants of the Decapolis, a predominantly Gentile people, pigs were commonplace, a normal part of life and economy. They raised them, sold them, and consumed them without a second thought. Seeing these pigs raised made it clear to the disciples that they were in a land far removed from the customs they knew and respected. Jesus' presence there, however, carried powerful symbolism. He was not there by chance. His mission was not limited to the Jewish people. It had a universal scope. By stepping into Gentile territory and interacting with people who had different cultures and beliefs, Jesus showed that his message was for everyone, without exception. He was breaking down the barriers between Jews and Gentiles, crossing borders that, at the time, seemed insurmountable. This action made it clear that the love and salvation he offered were not dependent on race, culture, or tradition. Everyone was called to experience his peace and mercy. This arrival in the Decapolis also shows how Jesus was willing to challenge the boundaries and prejudices of his own culture to reach those in need. The presence of pigs, so unclean in the eyes of a Jew, further highlighted Jesus' courage in breaking down these barriers, bringing his message of compassion and freedom to people who, according to the laws of his time, would be outside the chosen people. He did not see barriers where others saw them. He saw people, with their pain, their struggles, and their desire to find something greater. Thus, Jesus' arrival in the Decapolis is a defining moment in history. He was announcing that his ministry was for everyone. No matter their background, culture, or customs, he brought a message of hope and liberation that transcended all borders. In doing so, Jesus revealed that salvation was a universal invitation, opening the way for all humanity, Gentiles and Jews alike, to know him and be transformed by his presence and love. As soon as Jesus reached the shore, a man came to meet him. He was no ordinary man. He was marked by profound suffering. Living among the tombs, in a remote cemetery, he was someone everyone avoided, an isolated and tormented being. They said he was possessed, and the screams that echoed through the hills at night were testimony to his torment. No one could hold him, not even with chains. Many times they tried to tie him up, to bind his arms and legs, but he had supernatural strength, breaking the chains and shackles. His life was a shadow, a prison of pain and despair. That man was dominated by a legion of demons, a term that indicated a large and oppressive number, as if an invisible army occupied his mind and body. These demons not only controlled him, but also forced him to hurt himself, to injure himself with stones. He lived naked, far from society, as a symbol of total despair and degradation. With each wound he opened within himself, he expressed an inner pain that no one could heal, a soul imprisoned, ravaged by forces that pushed him towards self-destruction. He was the living portrait of someone who had lost his freedom, his peace, his control over himself. He was a symbol of the prison of sin and the devastating power of evil. When the man saw Jesus in the distance, something deep inside him recognized the authority of the one coming toward him. Running, he threw himself at Jesus' feet, and at that moment, the demons began to scream. They knew who Jesus was. "What do you want with us, Jesus, Son of the Most High God?" they begged. It was a desperate plea, for they knew they were facing a power they could not resist. They feared the fate that awaited them. This encounter was not just about man's liberation. It was a confrontation between divine power and the forces of evil. Jesus then asked, "What is your name?" And the man who was possessed by demons answered, "My name is Legion, for we are many." The use of the term a legion conveyed a powerful image, indicating not only the number of demons but also their organization, like an oppressive army. It was as if the man were dominated by forces that controlled every part of his life, unable to escape on his own. The demons begged Jesus not to cast them out, asking that they be sent to a herd of pigs that were grazing nearby. With the authority that only he possessed, Jesus allowed the demons to leave the man and enter the pigs. As soon as they did so, the pigs, in an uncontrollable frenzy, ran toward the cliff and threw themselves into the sea, where they drowned. The man's deliverance was immediate. Those demons that had held him prisoner for so long were now out of his life, and he finally felt at peace. Now free from evil dominion, the man sat at Jesus' feet. For the first time in a long time, he was dressed and in his right mind. The transformation was so visible that all who knew him could hardly believe it. What no one, no chains, no bars, no human strength, could do, Jesus did in a moment. He freed this man from a spiritual prison, showing everyone that no power of evil is greater than the power of God. This freed man became a living testimony to the mercy and power of Jesus. When he returned to his town, he told everyone what Jesus had done for him. Every person who heard his story realized that it was not just a physical deliverance, but a spiritual one, a complete transformation that showed that no matter how deep the oppression, there is hope and freedom. He symbolized for everyone the truth that the power of Jesus can restore even those trapped in the deepest shadows, bringing them back to light and life. When Jesus asked the demon-possessed man his name, the answer he received was both frightening and revealing. "My name is Legion, for we are many." To contemporary listeners, this word carried extraordinary weight. Legion was a Roman military term that represented a disciplined, powerful, and numerous group of soldiers, usually numbering as many as 6,000. By identifying themselves as Legion, the demons were revealing not only their numbers but also the kind of dominion they held over the man, an organized, oppressive, and relentless dominion, similar to that of an invading army. This answer revealed the scope of the battle Jesus was facing. This was not a single evil spirit. It was as if an entire army had taken possession of this man, suffocating every aspect of his life, destroying his peace, and controlling his thoughts, his actions, and even his body. This legion of demons kept him isolated, living among the tombs, and made him suffer to the point of self-inflicted wounds. The presence of this legion symbolized the ultimate spiritual oppression that anyone could experience, a true siege on that man's soul. For the spectators, the idea of legion also made the episode even more shocking, as it symbolized the level of despair and destruction that evil can cause. It was as if that man had been occupied and ruled by an organized force whose sole purpose was to destroy him. The demonic oppression was so intense that the man lost all freedom, being at the mercy of a force that manipulated him like a puppet. He could no longer live in society, could not maintain his sanity or protect his own body from injury. He was completely surrendered, like a soldier imprisoned in an enemy camp, deprived of any hope. The answer, there are many of us, not only indicated an immense number of demons, but also revealed the violence and force with which evil can invade someone's life, destroying every shred of dignity and humanity. The idea of a demonic legion inside that man was like a metaphor for the presence of evil in its most organized and devastating form, an evil that acted strategically to imprison, humiliate, and dominate. But at that moment, something extraordinary happened. Faced with all this oppression, with a legion of demons united in a controlling force, Jesus showed himself to be the only one who could confront and defeat such power. With a simple word, he showed that, no matter how numerous or powerful they were, those demons could do nothing against the authority of the Son of God. Jesus was facing an organized and intimidating force of evil, but his presence and authority were enough to defeat it. The legion that enslaved the man with so many demons, with all their strength, could not resist the power of Jesus. Even in their numbers and organization, they begged, recognizing that they were before someone who had absolute power over them. That moment made it clear that, before Jesus, no oppression is invincible. The legion symbolized the reach of evil, but Jesus symbolized the power of redemption, a power that can free even the most oppressed and dominated. When confronted with Jesus' authority, the demons, even though they knew they could not resist him, made an unusual request. They begged to be transferred to a group of pigs that were grazing on the nearby hills. This request seems strange at first glance, but it carries a deep symbolism and several meanings. The demons were facing an imminent and definitive expulsion. They knew that Jesus had the power to order them out of that man and that they could not remain in their current dwelling. However, instead of simply disappearing or being sent to a final destination of judgment, the demons asked to inhabit the pigs. This request reveals their inclination to seek refuge in beings considered unclean, according to Jewish law. Pigs were seen as ritually unclean animals and forbidden for consumption or handling, symbolizing everything that was despicable and contaminated. By begging to be sent to the pigs, the demons showed their nature. They prefer what is low, dirty, and degraded, and are naturally inclined to dwell in places that reflect their own impurity. Furthermore, this request suggests that the demons were resisting the idea of a definitive expulsion and were seeking a kind of temporary alternative to continue their influence on creation. They knew that Jesus had the power to destroy or confine them forever, but by asking to enter the pigs, they were trying to somehow prolong their existence and their destructive activity, albeit in another form. It is as if they were trying to postpone their own sentence, seeking a last place where they could exercise their destructive nature. The demons' request also highlights their hostile and chaotic nature, since once they entered the pigs, they quickly had a devastating effect. Once transferred to the animals, the pigs went crazy and ran wildly toward the cliff, where they fell and drowned in the lake. This behavior is significant, because it symbolizes how evil, even when temporarily transferred, brings disorder and destruction. The demons knew that their presence in the pigs would have catastrophic consequences, not only for the animals but also for the inhabitants of the region, who depended on these pigs for their livelihood. In its hostility, evil always seeks to cause suffering, whether in human life or in God's creation. By allowing the demons to go into the pigs, Jesus was also allowing the people to witness the destructive power of evil spirits. Seeing the entire herd of about 2,000 pigs rush over the cliff and die so brutally and suddenly left the inhabitants of the Decapolis stunned and terrified. They saw before their eyes the extent of the devastation that these spiritual forces could cause if left unchecked. It served as a powerful and visual reminder that evil, when unleashed, brings death and destruction. Finally, the episode of the demons in the pigs reveals an important contrast. While Jesus liberates and restores, evil degrades and destroys. The demons' request to enter the pigs, their inclination to seek out unclean beings, and the catastrophic effect they soon had are evidence of the self-destructive and rebellious nature of evil. Even with all their power and negative influence, the demons were subdued by Jesus' simple word. He confronted them, and in the end, the demons were powerless to resist, showing that, before God, evil is fragile and limited. This account of the possessed man, the legion of demons, and the pigs encapsulates one of Jesus' most profound teachings about the power and nature of evil. It shows us that, however terrifying and overwhelming the presence of darkness may be, it cannot withstand the authority of the Son of God. Jesus not only has the power to confront evil, but to completely free those under its dominion, restoring that person's dignity and sanity. The story also highlights the choice each of us faces: the freedom and peace offered by Jesus or the slavery and chaos that evil inevitably brings. Just as the inhabitants of the Decapolis refused to welcome Jesus into their lives and chose instead their material interests, we too have the opportunity today to accept or reject this transformation. Finally, the episode reminds us that Jesus' love and compassion know no boundaries, whether for the tormented man among the tombs or for the Gentile society of the Decapolis. He reaches out to everyone, offering the same healing and peace, regardless of cultural or spiritual barriers. The choice to respond to this invitation, however, is ours.